Hello, Healthcare Experience Matters listeners. Today we are joined by Mary-Lyn Baldauf. She is actually the current Chief Executive Officer of Qsource, formerly CEO of Kindred Hospital of Greensboro in Greensboro, North Carolina. And today we're talking service recovery. So, Mary-Lyn, welcome to the show. First and foremost, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. So I'm really excited to jump into the topic. Let's get into it. Service recovery, it's such a frequently discussed topic in really all industries, but in particular healthcare. So why is it so important to you?
So I would say when you think of service recovery, you think of obviously turning a dissatisfied customer into a happy one. In healthcare, however, it's not necessarily all about happiness. When you talk about service recovery, oftentimes it's dealing with rectifying a problem, something that's not working. And really, the importance of it is gaining the confidence of the patient and their families. I am particularly a very big advocate for patient rights and the overall healthcare experience. So I think service recovery is a very important aspect within overall the healthcare experience.
I'm curious as to where service recovery kind of fits in your overall patient experience strategy or some of those strategies you've been a part of in the past.
I mean, I would say that service recovery is extremely important in the overall strategy. And it's sort of, when you talk about service recovery, it's almost being able to anticipate issues that might come along with the patients and or families. That's the first one. And then in after anticipating, then it's actually dealing with it in-house and being able to respond and being able to, address those particular issues and such in order to increase that patient experience.
I hear you loud and clear on that one. So, what have been some examples of service recovery excellence that you've observed, in any industry or within your own organization? I'd love to hear about that.
I think, to me, when you think of service recovery, for example, from a personal standpoint, like if you think of the restaurant industry and you go out for a nice meal, oftentimes in a nice establishment, there issues can arise. And we've always said, my husband and I, if we're out together, we'll say it's not necessarily what the issue was. It's the way that the establishment responded to the issue. Even sometimes just a simple acknowledgement that there was a problem, and then the willingness to come up with some type of solution. And, it doesn't have to be that they'll comp the meal or this, that, or whatever. It can often be something even small, but I think just that the acknowledgement of it itself can often improve that experience completely. And so, that's sort of the experience. That's this how I look at it in regards to overall when you're dealing with service in any type of service industry. Healthcare is the same thing. I mean, it's just all how you address the problem and how you look for a solution.
I want to know about some plans here. Can you tell us about the importance of having a service recovery implementation plan? And can it actually help prevent service failures before they happen?
Yes. So I think having, a plan is extremely important. And as I said, being able to anticipate some of the issues in advance, and then obviously through the communication of what that is and expectations and such, establishing a game plan at the beginning can help negate any type of dissatisfaction throughout the patient's stay. And for example, we had a situation in the past where it had been communicated to us at the former hospital in terms of visitation. There was, some family dynamics that were outside of what our normal visitation process would be. So, in patients have the choice to come to us, right? And so, in choosing us, we just decided to sit down and have a meeting prior to that patient even arriving in to basically talk about what our expectations are and what our different visitation policies were talking it over with the family so that they understood, and there was a very clear understanding in terms of what it was going to look like when they came to into our building. And so doing that up front, being clear in terms of communication, knowing what their expectations were, and being able to explain to them what our expectations were. It just was a good way to sort of come up with just an overall solution to whatever issues they might have had at the previous establishment. And so once the patient came in, family was happy, patient was happy, and therefore then it just led to an overall good healthcare experience. So I think being able to sometimes, and that's not necessarily always the case. You don't know necessarily what the problems might be, but anytime communication is such a huge part in it, that if you can talk about, policies, procedures, expectations, all of that up front or even throughout the stay, you can normally, as I said, negate a lot of different issues that could come up.
So how do you go about evaluating the effectiveness of your service recovery process?
So for us, oftentimes when patients are discharging, so if they're going home, they'll do a discharge survey. So that's one way, obviously that's on the back end. Then also we have a reputation manager. We use reputation.com. And, they look at different social media sites. So reviews on Google, Facebook, Yelp, those type things. Those help us in order for us to know what our overall reputation is. And we've actually probably over the course of the last 3 years seen a dramatic increase just because we've decided and established a strong concentration on our overall patient experience. We have a patient advocate within our hospital that's basically what her job is to go around from admission to discharge and visit with the patient. We do for patients that aren't, or families that aren't able to necessarily come visit. We do video conferencing. Our patient advocate will do video conferencing with the patient and their family, wherever they might be, sometimes in state, sometimes out of state. She's even done it out of country. So, those are that type of, response. You can get real-time response from that. I mean, we have, families and patients that will tell us on the spot in terms of their satisfaction and such. And then it's always, as I said, the social media sites and reviews. That's always a great indicator as well.
And if we're all acknowledging that service recovery is so important, which we are, where do you see teams struggling with this?
I believe teams struggle when the culture does not the culture of perhaps either the team or the company, the organization doesn't support that. Really, it's every team and team members' responsibility to actually support a good service recovery strategy. We see it as it empowers our employees to be able to take a quick action to issues. And we've created it almost as a learning culture. Being able to identify issues, resolving issues and complaints ends up being a very positive response for not only the patient and the family, but for our employees too, for them to be able to see that. So, just being able to, as every single employee, able to identify problems and be able to help with some type of resolution. And then it comes back to, I believe that if your core values and mission have somewhere within them, embedded within them, a good patient experience outcome, then it's up to the organization, the leadership to talk about that often, to explain to everybody how vital it is to the overall experience. And so I think if teams are struggling, it's probably that hasn't been done, but true success is when it really is.
So, there's a lot of research out there linking the effectiveness of timely, well-executed service recovery and good impacts on the patient experience and even quality outcomes. So do you have any examples or stories of this that you'd like to share with us?
So we actually consider every type of issue or complaint, even like it can be something very small to anything, even up to something much bigger. But we consider all of those a grievance, and we have a grievance policy, which in part could be also said to be a part of our service recovery piece. But in that, oftentimes when that issue or what we say a grievance has been identified, we act on it immediately. So oftentimes it can be resolved on the spot because, obviously when you're looking for certain issues in it, whether it's a, clinician or a leadership member or whoever it is who is identifying them, once they identify it, they can either take a step to rectify it. And I mean, when I say little things, it could be something as simple as, that a patient is cold. We could absolutely, we would view that potentially as a grievance, that the room was too cold. Now, what do you do? The clinician would immediately go get a blanket, give him the blanket, and then it's resolved. But we follow it through the process and just make sure that all our leadership team, supervisors on the floor, as well as leadership, was aware of that, and that it was resolved, it was rectified. Because sometimes if it's bigger, then they might not be able to resolve it on the spot, and further people need to be involved within the investigation of what went wrong or what has to be done to resolve it. So we do that regularly, and then we're able to deal with those quickly, effectively, and it leads to what we find is an overall positive patient experience.
We've been talking to Mary-Lyn Baldauf. She is the CEO of Qsource and formerly CEO of Kindred Hospital of Greensboro in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I want to turn it over to her for the final word here. Is there anything else valuable, Mary-Lyn, that you wanted to share with our audience before we wrap it up?
When talking about service recovery in healthcare, it's an extremely important topic. Most patients, when they're in the hospital or at the point of needing care, it's usually quite a stressful time in their lives for them as well as for their family. And I think being able to identify things that might be not being in their mind done correctly and such, it's important for them to feel that people are addressing their concerns and being willing to rectify what they believe is something that isn't positive in their overall experience. And I think at the end of the day, by doing that, having a strategy involved within that, and being able to create a positive experience in what might not be a great period of time in that patient or their family's lives is something that is a responsibility for us as healthcare workers. It's something that as I said, I tend to be passionate about and be an advocate for, and so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about that here today.
Thank you again, Mary-Lyn, so much for your time today. This has been a great discussion.